Albert, welcome to CFO at Home. Thanks for your time today.
Vince, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me. It's a joy that I got a chance to get matched up with you. And I think your audience will have an opportunity to really gain something from our conversation this evening.
I couldn't agree more. Your book, Life, Truth, Love, Loss, Success, and Failure, has been described as speaking to every reader who longs for a guiding voice. Raised by parents who instilled 12 generational principles, Albert Butler shares vivid life experiences and memorable quotes that readers call a blueprint for faith, discipline, and unstoppable drive for success. There's another quote that I think is very relevant here. If you never met your dad, lost him too soon, shoulder fatherhood yourself, or juggle parenting roles of both mother and father, these pages will hand you a compass you deserve. So before we launch into our conversation, because the book is spans pretty wide on those subjects, we're going to narrow down on the subject of money for our conversation. But before we do that, could you share a bit more about the book and its inspiration?
Vince, thank you for that. The book is a passionable inspiration for myself. The genesis of it really came from a traveling situation where I was a young father and I was thinking about my kids. And in the process of thinking about my kids, I started thinking about my parents and all the influential things they shared with me. And then I further started thinking about my grandparents and great grandparents and all the opportunities I had a chance to sit at their knee and just observe and listen and digest all the wonderful advice, guidance, aphorisms, and all those things that that you hear about that turns into life lessons that can help guide you from day to day. So I wanted to have a way to share that with my children. And because I was traveling so much, I really felt the need to formally document those things. So I'll give you just a great little story. I'm traveling from Houston, Texas, over to Singapore, and that is a roughly 18 to 20-hour flight. And in the process of flying over the Pacific Ocean, these thoughts started coming to me, and I said, you know what? I really want to write this stuff down because I just had a new baby girl had just been born. I had to leave my wife, and I had a son at the time as well too. He was only 1.5 at the time, and so I worked on my first few quotes on that flight. And by the time I landed, I had some good information down. And as I would just start hearing things through the years, I kept adding more and adding more. And before I knew it, 17 years later had passed, and my son was getting ready to graduate from high school. And I promised myself and my family that I would get this all published so I could hand it to him for his graduation. Vince, I'll tell you, my son graduated last May, and I was able to hand him a relatively rough draft of the not current copy that's out right now, but I was able to hand him something that was a true piece of my love from my heart to my son and for my other children that he can actually cherish for a lifetime, and my other kids as well too. And the fun part about it is that the book has turned into something that others have really gravitated to because it's very real world experiences, and I've become very transparent in some of the things that I was going through at the time, and people have been connecting and people have been reviewing with very positive information.
That is great. And that's a story I can definitely identify with as the father of two sons who are both in their 20s, finding their way in this world. I'm also at that point in life where it's okay if I have accumulated some wisdom along the way. Hopefully, I have that desire to distill that information and pass that on and share it. That's the thing that drives me as well. That's the thing that drives this podcast. And I've been thinking about putting that into a book form. So I can definitely identify with where you're coming from. And of course, that's not an uncommon thought process, I think, with men once they reach a certain stage in life. But we all kind of process that through our life experiences. You are a CPA, an accountant. So you process that a sense through that lens because these things that we do for a living and spend so much time and energy devoting to, it becomes our lens and our window to the world. One of the quotes that came up more than once as I was reviewing the book was one of your favorite quotes, I think, is accounting is the heartbeat of business, And also, it relates it back to personal financial success, but it may even grow larger than that. So let's talk about that before we get into the particulars. Accounting is the heartbeat of business. Tell us a little bit about that and how it applies to personal finance.
I literally just finished a conversation with a group of staff people preparing for the CPA exam. And in that regard, I would always tell everyone, if you treat your life like a business, if you treat your personal finance like it's a business, you'll be amazed at what you will see. You'll be amazed at how you govern yourself. You'll be amazed at the results that you would achieve. Accounting being the heartbeat of business, I want you to conceptually think about it. Every entity, including us as people and business entities, are developed in a way that a system have to be built up for them to be able to function, flow, and prosper along the way. And the head of that entity would normally be your C-suite, where all the vision, all the objectives and goals are being developed and all brought together to create something that didn't exist before. But they can't do it alone. They need a team. And that message has to come down through the system, down to the production, or down through operations to develop and create something that wasn't there before. But once it's created, that message has to go right back up and go to the sales department. And sales have to go take it to the market and put it out there to sell it. And once they sell it, bring information back and send it back up. If you think about it, where are they sending all these signals to? They're sending it to the middle. They're sending it to the accounting department, where all information is reported on from the past, reported on the current situation, and then forecast on for the future. And all of those things that create financial statements. And those financial statements are the data and the information of the messaging that goes back up to the C-suite to tell the world how great the company is. So when you think about it, that heartbeat, that pulse in the middle, that information flow has to come through accounting. It is truly the heartbeat of business. And why is the key to personal finance success? If you treat yourself like you're a business, you'll have the results of a business that you want to thrive and that you want to flow because you are the visionary for everything that you do in your bank statement, your own personal net worth statement, your tax return. All of those data documents are just like a business financial statements. So you should cover it the same way.
Yeah, and with a podcast called CFO at Home, I couldn't agree with you more. A lot
Right.
of what you were talking about is the philosophy behind this podcast, which is basically in every home, there's that person who takes the lead, so to speak, in the things that you were just talking about, not because they're more intelligent, not because they're doing it in a dominating way, but I just find that people gravitate to it. So there is that person who, at the end of the day, is worrying maybe a little bit more and a little further ahead about things like how are we going to send the kids to college? Are we ever going to pay this house off? That kind of thing. And my experience, I'm not a CPA, but I've been in a corporate environment for 30 plus years. So in the same way that what you do for a living has crafted your worldview, so to speak, it's crafted mine too. So we're both rooted in that same philosophy. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to go a little bit off script here. I want to ask you specifically about something that I was thinking about even preparing for this interview. I try not to timestamp these podcasts too much, but I just can't resist this one. I'm going to do it. As we're recording, one of the things floating out of Washington, and a lot of things float out of Washington,
Right.
there's a lot of discussion about affordability. We're just a week or so away from the elections where the mayor of New York has been talking about affordability, the newly elected mayor. And that seems to be the buzzword that's going around now in political circles as far as financial things are concerned is affordability, affordability. So, one of the things that's been recently proposed is the 50-year mortgage. And I was thinking about that because I'm probably going to record a short on that and put that out here in the next couple of days. And I was thinking exactly how do I want to tackle this? From what perspective do I want to say this is ridiculous? Because in my heart of hearts, that's what I'm thinking. But it's like, how do I articulate that effectively? And at the end of the day, a home is a lot of things, but when you're purchasing a home, it's an investment. And much like you were saying, one of the mantras on this podcast is one of the key performance indicators of your personal finance is your net worth. So I'm thinking about it from the perspective of, and I'm actually going to play with some calculators and get some numbers here, is if you're paying a 50-year mortgage, how much, even in the early years, you're going to be paying majority interest with a conventional loan. It's going to take you forever, relatively speaking, to build up equity in that home. And that equity represents the increase in your net worth. So from a analytical perspective, from the CFO at home perspective, from the accounting is the heartbeat of business and your personal finance, to me, that's the way I look at that through that filter. I'm just curious as to what your thoughts are on that. I'm going a little bit off script, but hey, it's my
No,
podcast.
we are
What do
we
you
are
think?
right on the script, Vince. I when I tell you before I got on 20 minutes before I just had this conversation with a group of folks. This one's tough. This one's tough because it's not going to be something that's going to be well liked by what I'm probably going to say, and some might actually truly gravitate and enjoy these comments. Home is not the American dream, and I want to let that kind of sit and resonate. A home is not an American dream. The true American dream is to have a business that becomes an asset for you, that you can help grow and truly help that build your family to move on to the next generation. Having a home will resonate from the labors of that business. And that is a beautiful luxury to have, to be able to purchase a home. Notice I said purchase, not finance. If you get a 50-year mortgage, what does that really mean? You just created a beautiful dream for the banker. Why? Because the banker has a customer for 50 years now. Conceptually, if you think about it, what do we unfortunately do? We only pay the minimum amount on our actual mortgage payment. So we're flip that to a credit card. What if you only paid the minimum amount for a credit card? How long would it take you to pay that credit card off? How much interest would you end up paying if you only paid the minimum amount? Same thing for any type of loan that you take out. We have a tradition of only paying the minimum amount. So as you're paying that minimum amount, you're still setting yourself up, to your point a second ago, interest, and the banker is so excited that you are the best customer ever. So here's what happened. Banks usually only loan money to businesses. And if they loan money to a business, that business is generating income on a regular basis. So they're paying off that loan. And sometimes if that business is successful, they pay off that debt obligation relatively quickly. So that's a bad customer for a bank. They had to make up something to make people feel more excited about buying something that'll lock them in to make them a long-term customer. And there it have you, a 30-year customer was created to give you an avenue to buy something that locks you in, and you're excited about doing it, and it looks like a win-win for everybody. But in essence, in the short term, it's a win for the banker. In the long term, it's still a win for the banker because they had you for all this time and made all this double what you borrowed almost. So it's tough. That's a tough one.
Yeah, in my opinion, it's the next evolution of what they've already done with like car loans. Car loans have
Yes.
gotten just out of control, and it plays to a mentality. And I really hate it when I feel like Washington is talking down to people. And the way they put this out was, hey, if you get a 400 loan on a $400,000 house, this will decrease your payment per month by $250. So this is the leadership of our country encouraging us to have a not how much, but how much a month attitude.
That's right.
I just wanted to make sure. I've
It's
read some
the
things. You're the first human being I've had to bounce this off of. I thought it was disgusting, but I wanted to hold off until I could bounce it off of somebody.
so think about it. It's a used car salesman approach to selling a house. Buying a house for what you can afford to pay monthly as compared to buying a house, period. Conceptually,
Yeah.
think about that. that this pen I have in my hand? What if I had to put a loan on buying a pen? Once the pen ran out of ink, it becomes basically almost useless, but I still have a loan to pay on it. So it creates a bad habit, and it's going to create more people buying things they really can't afford. And the way the credit cycle actually works, because we are in a capitalistic world, especially for our country, we're a capitalistic environment. The credit cycle is what's important. The credit cycle has to keep going because what I borrow becomes your income. And your income allows you to go buy more things, and that cycle keeps on going. So it puts us in a very awkward position when you offer something, and unfortunately, we are not that responsible of a people to be able to handle that level of responsibility to know how to negotiate that the correct way. Now, I will say this. We go to the next topic. I will say this. If you offered me, a person who understands how the money cycle works, an opportunity to get a 50-year mortgage, that means you're lowering the standard on how much I have to pay you on a monthly basis, but I know I can afford it and I'm going to be prudent about it. I will take that contract. But when I take that contract, I'm going to not pay you, I'm not going to just pay you the minimum amount. I'm probably going to pay you triple the amount and pay you off not in 50 years. You'll be paid off no later than 15 or 20 years. So now I got that asset and I used your money to buy it. And now I'm directly increasing my family's net worth by that approach. That would be a better deal if you can be that prudent and be able to afford it the right way.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are X amount of people who may even have that idea going in. Maybe 20% of them would execute on it because of life and other factors, and maybe not being in the financial position to see that through. But yeah, I'm so offended by it. Only a person who has bankrupted casinos and sold steaks under his name and water and a fake university could come up with it. But I digress. So, thank you for indulging me with that
No
one.
worries,
Now,
no worries. I actually like
yeah.
the conversation. That's a good one.
All right. And it does help us to segue into the next part of our conversation, I guess, with a little bit more direct relevance to what's going on today, because I want to focus the remainder of our conversation on, and again, your book, in addition to all of the life wisdom and messages that it shares, you have a chapter, a bonus chapter, I believe, that focuses specifically on the subject of money, correct?
That's correct. That's correct. And I saved
Uh,
it for last on purpose. Saved it for last on purpose. And in the genesis of doing that is because we are so motivated by money. Money is purely just a tool. It's just a tool from to exchange resources from one group to the next. And I purposely left it last because I wanted the reader to really gravitate of the wisdom of being able to handle yourself in life's different situations. And then when it comes down to the end, reading about the tool to move one asset to the next asset for equivalent exchange to take place, that kind of puts full well roundedness on the understanding of how life really works for you. I would hate for any young person to be motivated purely by money. And that's the final thoughts of it. Being motivated by money will make you make bad decisions. And that's just a hard evidence-based fact that we have seen over and over again. So I put it last on purpose, and the guidance that's in it is designed in a way to help you manage yourself accordingly in the use of the tool of money.
yeah, and I haven't had a chance to read the book cover to cover, but I have hit some highlights through it. And it seemed as though I could sense exactly what you were talking about, because even in glancing at parts of it, it really sets this thing up as money is more of a tool.
That's right.
So if you're using the book to just set basic principles about life, it makes sense that you would do that. You're really talking about the what am I trying to achieve here? And what are my values and all those good things. You set that up. And then once you set up that framework, you get to more of the how, because money drives these things. You're putting the subject of money in perspective, so it's not money just for the sake of money. It's money, how it applies to these other things that we've been talking about in terms of really just life. And we don't have time to go through everything that you hit on in the book, but if you're using the rest of the book to frame up the conversation of money, what are maybe two principles that are important for us to keep in mind before we really start contemplating money and really planning out what we want to do with our money? What are just a couple of those other elements?
I will tell you, and I want your audience to really resonate on this concept of truly finding your purpose for why you want to do what you want to do. And as you find your purpose for why you want to do what you want to do, then you look at your resources around you to be able to accomplish that purpose. One of those resources could be money. Another one of those resources could be your inner circle. Another one of those resources could be access to someone like yourself, Vince. That to me is a whole lot more resonating than the conversation of money, because you should use that money to help you achieve your God-given purpose for your own sense of being, and how you're going to interrelate that to family. I really try to stress how important family really is in this whole concept of all this. That's why the book itself has the very first thing is the family value system. And in that system, it's guided in a way to teach you purpose, and from purpose, the why surrounding the purpose, and then layered into the runway of opportunity that is going to take you to get to that purpose. I try to stress as well the power of saying no. And when you know your purpose, you are able to say no to different opportunities that just might not align with that. And that's why I said making decisions when money is involved, it can lead you to making the wrong decision if you make that decision not based into your purpose. Money's going to come if you do what's in your heart. Money's going to be there and going to be something that you're going to use to achieve, but never let that be the cause, and that never let that be the sole purpose. Purpose should be what you're guiding to, what you're striving for, and what you ultimately will achieve as you walk your own personal walk.
And you're a family man. You mentioned family and the way you just described that. You're a believer. There's some scripture quotes in the book. This whole thing about purpose in the outline of kind of philosophical outline for this podcast, one of the things that I talk about, because I basically use the functions of a corporate CFO and, hey, how do you replicate this at home? One of the things that I lean into quite a bit in that analogy is the equivalent of stakeholder buy-in. And when you were talking about family and purpose, realistically, the family, particularly the adults, the head of that family, when we talk about purpose, when two people get together, there's my purpose and your purpose, and somehow eventually, hopefully, we develop a we purpose. Being effective in developing a purpose that you can really stand behind, how important is that unity of purpose within the family?
So it's interesting because another question that right backs that up too is identifying that person to help continue that purpose. As you're matriculating, you walk through life in a level of becoming independent, right? You want to be able to take care of yourself, be guided in what spiritually grounds you, and be able to progress. While at the same time, you're leaning into connected with somebody who's also independent. You're not going to be great at everything. They're not going to be great at everything, but hopefully you're connected with somebody who you can become interdependent upon. And as you're interdependent with each other, you become that we. You become that one. You become that collected set of two people that are guiding in a way as one to achieve an overall goal and purpose. And that turns into a lot of raising the family. And as a lot of things come up when you're raising your family that honestly you never realized this was going to be something that's going to come up. But if you have that person, and if you have that other person who's also, you guys are interdependent upon each other, you guys can meet these challenges of life together. And I know a lot of times in the way things are now, people, they go through life and life gets hard and then they split apart. And nobody ever said that your happiness was guaranteed. That's not the case. You're going to have ebb and flows, ups and downs, sideways, going crooked sometimes. But when you can have someone who you're interdependent upon, you can meet those challenges. And you're going to argue and you're going to have disagreements. Having a way to come to a conclusion on those things are always important to fully talk and communicate about how you feel. And I'll go one step further, being transparent with your children. I think that's extremely important because when you're not transparent with your kids, that's and you're not passing on those life lessons that they're going to be confronted with. I come back with the question of, do you really love your kids? Because now you're trying to protect them from something that they're going to have to be confronted with in life as life goes on. So being transparent with situations, being transparent with finances, teaching them how the money cycle really works, showing them how the tax system actually works, talking about the political process. All these things they necessarily don't teach in school, but as an adult, you will have to face them. So in the book, I do talk about these things in a little bit more detail, but as a whole, walking our talk this with family members and anyone who wants to hear me talk about it, that it's important to be transparent to be able to allow you to help govern how the progression of becoming that we, becoming that one, and being able to pass it on to the next generation.
When it comes to that transparency with kids, I want to just come back to that one for half a second because I've had some interesting conversations on this in the past. Would you say that transparency, that financial transparency, includes sharing financial struggles that the family may be having?
100%. Why? Because children need to understand that this stuff does not come out of thin air. They need to understand that if you get a chance to go off and go play on the little league football team, mommy and daddy had to pay registration fees. And that money had to come from somewhere. The system had to be worked out and budgeted out to be able to do things. I tell my wife and I tell my kids, we get together and we plan long term of what we're trying to go. Why? Because we're not going to do anything on the last minute. It just doesn't work that way. Daddy's finances and mommy's finances, our household finances are built on a budget, built on a zero-based budget. Every dollar has a job. And because every dollar has a job, if the spur of the moment things pop up, I got to go into the reserve to try to take care of them. And too many of those things will put us in a bad position. So being transparent about family struggles, financial struggles are important because the mistake that you make, you don't want your child to make the same mistake. You want them to be exposed to see how you can govern yourself through that and help them understand that this is where mommy and daddy might have went wrong. So you can see how you can go right. And here's how we're going to collectively go right going forward so that mistake doesn't repeat itself. So 100% yes, those struggles are important to share with your children.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And there's always an age appropriate way of doing that. You don't want to scare the crap out of your kid, but there's always an age appropriate way to share it. One of the things that to this day resonates with me, memory, was I don't know how old I was, maybe 10 or something like that. And my father worked in construction, which is a very cyclical thing. So it was
Mm-hmm.
a downtime in the economy. So it was a downtime for his work, and it was the year that Santa Claus went away because my mom told all of us, "Look, your dad's not working as much as he was before, so this Christmas is going to look a little different." And she gave us a dollar amount, and she said, "This is your dollar amount for Christmas. You tell us what you want." And it was not nearly what it had been in previous years. I think maybe I had two gifts, but one I enjoyed the gifts, so that's one thing. But I can remember the feeling that I had even when she was telling me that it was not, oh no, I'm not gonna be able to give this, I'm not gonna be able to give that. It was a, wow, you're letting me behind the curtain here. I
Right.
appreciate that. You're treating me, because around 10 or so, you want to be treated a little bit more like an adult, that kind of thing. You want to feel like you're growing up. And I was just at that age and it was like, oh, okay, sucks, but you're sharing this with me. All right, I'm gonna buck up. I'm gonna contribute. So kids are a little bit more resilient than we think.
That's
So
right.
I think it's a win-win. It's character building for the kids, and like in that case, I didn't it I didn't realize it until years later, but I'm almost sure that once everything went okay that Christmas day, there was a look of relief on my father's face. So
100%.
just that, and it created a moment that I can remember that's probably one of my most vivid Christmas memories. It was not the Christmas I got the Hot Wheels or whatever it is I wanted that year. It was that year, and
That's right.
just made it just that much more special.
Wow.
So, in the time we have remaining, Albert, I do want to get a little tactical here,
Okay.
because your book, that chapter that we talked about earlier, has some very practical, tactical information in it. And at least from the notes that I have here, a lot of it is really around it says budgeting, and it gives these five essential steps to build a sustainable and effective budget. I would say that it even goes beyond that, because a lot of times when you hear that, you don't go beyond this is how you build a budget, and you can do it on a spreadsheet, you can get an app, that kind of thing. And it talks about how to use that, and that's about it. You actually take it far beyond that. So I love the way you lay that out. I'd just like to hit on at least as a few of these topics. I'm not going to say we get all five. That is a bad habit of mine on this podcast. I'll say we're going to get the five things here, and we have a great conversation on two, and I feel guilty.
Right.
So we're going to step through a few of these, because they're I think each one of them has a message to deliver. Step one, calculate your net income and define financial goals. We've talked a little bit about defining financial goals. I'd like to hear you talk a little bit more about the importance of calculating net income, because I'm a big proponent of that as well.
So I mentioned earlier that I'm a big believer in doing a cash flow statement for yourself. And doing that cash flow, it really lights your eyes up to understand, hey, this is where my money is really going. In the essence, calculating your net income is critical with right along with that. So doing your own personal P&L statement. Where's my profit? Where's my spend actually going? Hey, I made this much money on my job this month. I went through my bank statement and I saw all these expenses coming out of here from what I actually paid for. And did I have am I in the green? Am I in the black or am I in the red? Where did I end up at? And then you'll find out that your dollars are going to places that you never really thought that they would even be going to. You'll find all those subscription services that pop up and you're spending money on them and you forgot that you even have them. You'll find how much you're actually spending on all those Amazon and Walmart deliveries and Target deliveries to the house. You'll find all these different avenues of reasons that you're spending, and you're not earning. So I'll go one step further. That one thing that I do in my practice is that I work with people personally on building a tax strategy that makes sense for them to help them truly build. Because I give the advice that every US citizen, we all required to pay taxes. If you like streets lights and streets and the police and the fire department to come and do their job and all those things, we need to pay taxes. But how much I pay, how much you pay, and how much your listeners pay, that number is totally different. So your job is to find out what your number really is, because you're required to pay, but you're not required to pay a penny more. So because you're not required to pay a penny more, you need to know how your spend is actually going. How are you making your money? How are you telling your story? And that is the essence of doing that net income statement for yourself. Because I would go one step further. You do a complete set of financial statements for yourself, not just a P&L. You need to do a balance sheet, and definitely need to do a cash flow. And if we can go in a little bit more detail on how that all works out, and it's a little bit of accounting nerdyism in there, but that's a word. That's a word.
Look
But
it up.
I look it up. But I will say it's powerful. Why? Because accounting is beautiful. It is truly beautiful. It is the only discipline where equilibrium is truly required. Equivalent exchange takes place with it. It has to balance. It has to balance. And not just you personally have to balance, but you have to balance with the world around you. So all of that is universal to a sense and an essence of it all. So it's a beauty inside of it that accounting gives you, that when you truly understand it, it becomes a superpower for you, not just in business, but personally as well too. So yes, definitely do an income statement, do a personal set of financial statements for yourself, and you'll be amazed at how powerful you can become.
I agree with that totally. And one out of many things you get out of that, one thing that I always emphasize, and again going back to the KPIs of your life, the key performance indicators, I think net income when it comes to your personal finances, if I had to pick one metric or the primary metric to measure your progress, it is net income because there are so many different things and decisions that you can put through that filter and actually get clarity almost on decision making. It's like the 50-year mortgage thing that I was talking about earlier. You put that through the filter of how is this going to affect my net income? Is this going to be a positive move for my net income? Not net income, I'm sorry, net worth.
Net
Sorry.
worth. Yes, net worth.
Yeah. I actually meant net worth. But as far as your net worth is concerned, the reason that is such a measurement, because that's the ultimate measurement to me of whether you're winning or losing the game.
That's it.
Again, you put that 50-year mortgage into that and you look at how much interest you're paying and how little equity you're building up, that answers the question. You're not advancing your net worth there. So just that being an indicator to me is extremely powerful. And the things that you're talking about as far as cash flow statements and all those things, they will give you all the other indicators behind that. But to me, net worth is that guiding star. So if you're nerds about this thing like you and I are, and,
That's
and I
it.
hope you don't mind me lovingly
That's it.
loving you into the money nerd category, all these measures are important. But I would have to say if a person's going to pick one measurement to filter their decisions through, it's actually net worth.
And you're 100% right, Vince. Watch this. I want to share this with your audience as well. How you run a business. If you are an executive and you have the control of the budget of that business, there's three ways to run a business. Rate number one is cash flow. I run my business on cash flow. What cash comes in, I know how much money I got, how much money I got to spend, and that's how I worry and I make my decisions based off cash flow. Basing your decisions off cash flow is the current period right now. I'm not worrying about tomorrow. I'm worried about today. Bit concerning. Running my business off my P&L, off my revenue, off my expenses, off my net income. Hey, here's what I know today on how I earned my money, and this is what I know how I spent my money. It's a different metrics to look at because now I'm looking at this is my past performance will dictate my future progress. That's another way to run the business. Kind of a little bit better than the cash flow. Here's the third way. I run it off my balance sheet. I run off my net worth. I know what my assets are. I know how much I spent to acquire assets. I know how much those liabilities associated with those assets fall down on my bottom line of what my personal retained earnings actually are. So my retained earnings is my true net worth. If you ever wanted to truly simply value a business, look at their retained earnings. Look at that entity, how much they actually retain to grow that entity. Because remember, like I said before, a business is just like a person. It's an entity, it's a living, breathing entity that's out there. So the real value of it is how much you can retain. So from a personal perspective, how much you don't spend, how much you retain will dictate if you have something to pass. If you have something to pass on to the next generation, your actual net worth, what you can retain, how much you didn't spend is so powerfully important.
Yeah, in the world of personal finances, you can look at a person's income. You can have a high income, but a relatively small net worth. You can also have a more moderate net income, but have much more of a net worth. I Too many times I think we measure ourselves on net income,
Mhm.
which is assuming that we're going to live that good long life that we want to is fleeting anyway, because over the course of a career, income goes up and down. Now, if you have a business, it's a little different deal, particularly if you are a employee, that income is going to go up and down.
That's right.
As you have that income, though, building that net worth, which ultimately is going to be the thing that generates the income you live on for the rest of your life.
That's it.
That's the thing. And there's so many false flags out there. To me, there are leading indicators and there are lagging indicators. Discussions of credit scores are another pet peeve of mine
Yeah.
because I personally think a good credit score is a lagging indicator of you living your financial life correctly. It's not, oh, I need to get my credit score up because it's just backwards. And that's just another pet peeve of mine. I'm not going to go down that
Oh, we
road, but
could. We
I
definitely
wanted
can.
to.
Just look, my brain is riling up, Vince. I'm telling you, it's because I look credit
Well,
scores. They don't mean
yeah,
anything, big man. They don't.
yeah,
They're for credit only. That's
yeah,
it. To be able
yeah.
to acquire it.
Yeah, and really, we may go completely off the rails here, but particularly when I have a guest like you, let's be real. This is the way that personal finance has been sold to our people,
Yes,
and
that's
and,
right.
and that gets me. It is a discussion to kind of loop back to a lot of the things we've discussed here. It is a discussion of not how much, but how much a month. It's a discussion of here's a trick that can get your credit score up. It's those kind of things, and it's not the more substantial conversations of net income and leveraging net income
That's it.
to build net worth and that type of thing. Particularly in our community, the way that it's been sold is so completely backwards it kills me.
Vince, you ever played football or any type of contact sport, or any of your kids or anybody playing any contact sport?
I watch a lot of NFL and I used to be pretty good in Madden, so
Yeah.
close
So
enough.
so I'm gonna share a term that we don't talk about from a finance perspective, and the term is called leverage. Nobody ever gives a good conversation understanding what financial leverage really is. And financial leverage is the true credit conversation because because we are in a capitalistic society, using your leveraging power to acquire assets is what our people don't get a chance to talk about or is not shared at the dinner table. If I take my credit and use my leverage to go buy an asset that's going to give me a return that's greater than the interest associated to that credit, I am winning every single time because I am growing and I'm building my net worth with those assets. While at the same time, that leverage of that credit that I used at that time, I'm paying it down because that asset turns into something that's going to generate income. So we don't have that conversation, and there's no guidance that's given to talk about it. Why? Because our children, especially, are in a society these days of I need it now, I want it then, and I'm not going to wait for it because I'm being bombarded by marketing of I want to buy, spend just to have. So it's very difficult for us to pull back and say, let's really think about this. Let's understand how the money cycle really works. Because when you understand how it really works and how to use financial leverage, you're going to win all the time and it will help you find your divine purpose and it will help you grow your family and all those things that we've always wanted will make their way to us. And it bothers me so much, and I talk about this a lot in the book, and I have consultations about this all the time about how to use financial leverage the right way. And it falls back on the conversations that were had when you were a child and it never happened. And it goes back to our previous conversation about the transparencies and the struggles about finance that our parents might have had that we should be full transparency with our children about. So I encourage anyone who wants to have that conversation about financial leverage to let's talk about it and let's make it a more bright spotlight to have a conversation about with our young people so they know how to spend their money the right way and not let all the marketing and all the noise take us away from what our divine purpose truly is.
So, in my experience, one of the more noble reasons that I know that people get concerned about their credit score, for example, is I want to buy a house. So I have to get my credit score up in order to be able to get a loan for a house. In terms of loans and using financial leverage, speak a little bit about that. The person who may be thinking they're not thinking about net worth, they're not thinking about those things. They part of the alleged American dream, although you've already busted that myth, is home ownership. But if that person just has it on their heart that they want a home and therefore I need to get my credit score up. If somebody came to you with that scenario, what probing questions would you ask behind that?
It happens all the time because you know what else that comes when somebody says they want to buy a house? Hey, I haven't done my taxes in years. I got the bankers telling me I need to have tax returns, man. I got to get this house. I need you to help me get this done. I'm like, come sit down. Let's have a conversation. When you go to your CPA, it's like going to the doctor. You got to be ready to be open and exposed because I'm going to take a scalpel and I'm going to go into your financial life and I'm going to roll back the onion on your whys of what you're doing and why you're doing what you're doing because and I'm going to help you get your taxes right. But in the process of doing that, I want to make sure you don't put yourself in the same situation all over again. That's part of my own personal fiduciary duty as someone who wants the best for every client that I have. So we're going to talk about where do you see yourself going with this transaction that you're about to make? Why have you not prepared your tax returns? Why don't you know where your net worth really is? Why is your credit score so? What habits led to this behavior? Because if we can't figure out what the habits that caused this is always going to do is happen again. And where do habits come from? Habits come from repetitive behavior that you do over and over again, unconscious behavior. Where do those come from? They normally come by from what you speak and what comes out your mouth. What does that come from? It comes from what you're thinking inside your mind. And what it all boils down to is your character as a person. So if you really want to manifest something positive for yourself, you got to start thinking better for yourself. And that's the conversation that we would have. We're going to roll back the onion on all your whys to put you in the position that you're in right now. Because whatever you think, you will say. Whatever you say, you will do. And whatever you do becomes your habits. And your habits turn into your results. And your results, that's your character of a person that you are. And those are your successes and your failures. So inside this book, I go through a whole conversation about manifestation and what it really means to the individual person and how it impacts your family. Because you'll be amazed at who's watching you. You'll be amazed at who is going to follow in your footsteps. You'll be amazed at how many people are seeing how you walk, how you talk, what you say, when you say it, and when you do it. Because everything you do shows energy that comes off from you and goes into everybody else. So that's the conversation I'm going to have with them. We're going to go through a whole process of understanding all of your whys to align your whys up properly because I would feel bad if I go and do all this work for you and the only thing that's going to happen is you're going to return right back with the same problem 2 years later. And now we're doing the same thing all over again. And you're going to say, Albert, why didn't you tell me all this stuff before? No, we're not going to do that. We're going to document everything we talked about, and we're going to walk you through with a strategy to make sure that your net worth, your net income, your cash flow, your whole process, your opportunity roadmap is set up in a way for true success and true greatness that you can pass on to your family for future generations.
I'm so glad that I didn't limit this conversation to the path that I originally had set up in my notes. We're not going to make it past the leverage conversation
Right.
because,
That's a long
uh,
one.
yeah, because we do need to start wrapping it up. But I've got one more before we wrap it up that I have to ask you about in terms of leverage. The other thing that people will do and justify in terms of, for lack of a better way of putting it, good debt versus bad debt is the way we refer to it. The other one that's a double-edged sword is student loans. So student loans can be seen as investing in yourself,
Right.
which I believe in your book you talk about. A lot of people traditionally see that as being a positive leverage because I'm going to borrow this money, but there's going to be a return on that in enhancing my ability to make money. What are your thoughts on that? Or as you're counseling people, if you get in a position where you're counseling your kids or a neighbor's kid or somebody asks you're a CPA, I'm sure you get these questions all the time. I'm thinking about taking out a loan for junior to go to the dream college. What's your advice? Again, what are the probing questions that you're asking there?
First question would be, do you go to the casino? Do you shoot craps or do you play blackjack? Which one you want to pick? Because Junior needs to understand what's his purpose for being and where he's going. If Junior's picking is being courted by a university that's extremely expensive, and when you do the math that you truly can't afford it, Junior definitely can't afford it. What is that university going to give Junior? The biggest thing that school gives, and you know this when you get ready to hire somebody, only thing a degree tells me is that you was disciplined for 4 years to meet the minimum requirement. If you ever read a degree and see what it says, when they even announce you coming across the stage, such and such has met the minimum requirements for this discipline, which means that you get to walk into a new industry at zero because you don't have any experience. You met the theory requirement to be able to enter the gateway to get there. What are you really getting out of it? So unless you are walking into a discipline that's going to have a return to be able to pay that loan back, we need to have a conversation about what you're going to do about that. So I'll give you an example with my kids, and I'll be very transparent about this. My son, he just went into college. And as a kid, I have 4 children. I told them very transparently, here's what we're going to do. We're going to learn about all the things that you're going to be able to absorb from an MBA course. You're going to get them right in this house. I have, just like you see books behind me, I have the same bookshelves at my home where my kids are required to read one book per month and do a presentation on it and do a written presentation and a verbal presentation to my wife and I and to their siblings. Why? Because inside those books are things that you are never going to be able to get inside any other conversation there is. My mentors are the people that are inside those books that I'll never get a chance to meet in person, but they tell me their whole life story. Their good, their ups, their downs, and everything. So each one of them have the opportunity to get scholarships, to get grants, to get all these things by making your job of making good grades, being active in the community, taking on an extracurricular activity if you so desire, to build up a resume that some school is going to say, hey, you know what? We want this particular child to come to our school. Why? Because they make our school better. And by them making our school better, they're going to enter and matriculate through, and they're going to graduate, and they're going to go off to some company or start a business or something, and they're going to give back to their school, college, university, just the business itself. And when you understand that cycle flows in a way just like the same money cycle, credit cycle we've been talking about before, they want the best students at their school because the best students are going to leave that school and they're going to be an advertisement for other new students coming to that school for what they're going to get out of it. So why should I have to pay for it if I'm doing something for your school? So my kids are going to get scholarships. They're going to work hard to be as marketable as possible. They're going to take the SAT, ACT, go and get the highest score they possibly can to do the best they possibly can. And based off what they could do, these are the schools that are opportunities for you and for you to pick the degree program that's going to be best for you at that time. If you decide you can't do those things, your next option is to go to the military. Why? Because I'm a believer in supporting the country in that regard. And if you decide you don't want to go to the military, the next option for you is to go get a trade. The trade field is wide open with amazing opportunities right now for people for blue collar work that we just need hands on, especially with the onset of AI. We need electricians, we need plumbers, we need general contractors. All these opportunities are available and that are out there. So why would I go and take out all this debt to go to school when I'm going to benefit the school because I'm going to do great, or I'm going to use the military asset to be able to pay for school, or I'm going to go get a trade so I can go in and get into the workforce to give back to my community as a whole. All those things are required to make sure your family is built right with disciplines that can provide value back to the family. So that's the conversation I have with my kids. You got 3 options, and you got the opportunity to pick one of those 3. And there is no other option besides those 3, because at a certain point, I love you and I'm required to take care of you, and I will. We're going to do all those things, and this is always going to be home. But you're going to provide a value to society along the way, which means you're going to provide a value to this household as well, too.
That is a complete answer to a question. I love it.
Look, Vince, you opened the door, man. I had to run through it when you did.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And even though, like I said, we strayed from the script a long time ago, who cares?
Perfect.
It
Yes. Yes. I
yeah,
loved it.
yeah, yeah. Albert, it's been a great conversation. The book again is Life, Truth, Love, Loss, Success, and Failure. We will provide a link to the book directly to the show notes of this episode. We'll also provide a link to your online headquarters, which is albertbutler.com, as well as some of your favorite socials, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Outside of that, if our listeners want to reach out to you, did we pretty much cover the bases, or is there an additional one?
Well, you covered the bases, but I will tell you, if you just Google Albert Butler CPA, you'll see so many different articles that I have out there. I have an article in Yahoo Finance, one on Forbes.com as well too, and Access Wire, Business Insider. You'll see all those great things. Just Google Albert Butler CPA. And if I could just leave with your listeners that always sit back and think about, what do you have to pass? What do you have to pass from this generation to the next? And it's scripturally written that on Proverbs 13:22, a man leaves an inheritance for his children's children. And that's something that I covet very highly, that I encourage all of us, men, women, whatever, to do our best to leave something, not just for your children, but for your children's children.
And again, we spent most of our time talking about the money part of this thing. The majority of your book, like we talked about earlier, is just to build up the thing to prepare us to think about our money correctly. Really, some of the most substantial parts of the book we didn't have a chance to talk about here. I picked up a copy earlier. I strongly urge my listeners to do the same. Thanks for your time, Albert. Thanks for being on CFO at Home.
Vince, thank you so much. I greatly appreciate it.